Okay, let's get this done before we lose this again. So, I don't know, has anybody been to Neptune? Does everybody know where we are?
Yep.
We can start there.
No.
Okay, well, we are about the third terminal west of the Second Narrows Bridge. So where they built low-level road, where it starts to go up the hill, and there's an overpass that goes down, not the Phillips Street overpass or the one over by C-SPAN, but the one further east, goes down into Neptune. Goes down into Neptune and one of the grain terminals, which is Cargill, our neighbor. So that's where our terminal is located. I work out of an office at about 4th and Brooksbank by John Henry Bikes. That's where our administrative office is. But so we're one of, I think it's about 8 terminals on the North Shore, and we're about the busiest terminal on the North Shore. They call us the multi-product bulk terminal. But most of the terminals on the North Shore are bulk, meaning the products are loaded directly into the holds of the ship. They're not put on containers. There's no container terminals on the North Shore. Those all are on the South Shore for the most part, or out in Roberts Bank. So the North Shore all combined makes up about 50% of the volume that gets shipped out of the Port of Vancouver. It's a pretty important part of the port. And Neptune makes up about, I think it's around 10% of the volume out of the port. We handle a lot of tonnage out of our terminal every year, about 16 million tons of product last year. Of course, the value of those products changes. Commodity prices go up and down. But in an average year, it would not be unusual for us to ship, not our products, but for the companies that own them, about $4 billion worth of goods across our docks. So, and you think that's just one terminal. If you add them all together, that's a significant contribution to Canadian GDP that's happening in North Van. We're a privately owned company. We're owned by Canpotex, which is the big potash companies out of Saskatchewan. Right now that's Nutrien and Mosaic, because two of them, Potash Corp and Agrium, merged to form Nutrien. And Teck Resources, Teck the big mining company, but specifically their coal division, which is all metallurgical or steel making coal. So we only handle products for them. We have no extra capacity to sell on the market. Any community relations we do, any marketing or sponsorship we do, it's all just for philanthropic purposes or community engagement, a chance to get to know the people in our community and tell them about what we do. So we handle potash and steel-making coal. We have, until yesterday, had one very small inbound product that we imported for one of those shareholder companies, and that was phosphate rock, which gets used to make fertilizer. However, we finished unloading the last ship yesterday, so right now we don't really know what Agrium Nutrien will choose to do with that capacity. They have some rights to ship some product through us, and we'll have to wait and see what they decide to do with that. On paper, we can handle about 23.5 million tons a year, but I mentioned that last year was 16.5, so we're just dependent on the shareholders' need to ship through us. Teck is investing quite a lot in Neptune right now to expand their ability to ship the steel-making coal through us. So we'll have a bigger capacity for coal, but again, it depends what they decide to send our way. If they have other terminals, they ship from West Shore out by the ferry, and they ship from Ridley terminals in Prince Rupert as well. But we're a little different in that they own us. We're part of their supply chain, so it's a more cost-effective option for them. And they trust us for the quality of service that we provide to them too. We have about 360 full-time jobs. That varies. I would say 350 to 400. But there's only about 50 of us who are actual employees of the company, like me. The rest are unionized. ILWU foreman, which is one local of the ILWU, and then the longshoreman, which is the other local, which makes up the bulk of the jobs. And those people can work anywhere in the waterfront, the longshore. They work from a dispatch hall downtown, and they get sent to us depending on our labor needs. Great for flexibility, so we only have to staff, because of course labor is your biggest cost, you only have to staff what operations you have going on, but really challenging from a culture point of view, employee engagement, safety and training, all those sorts of things. We are the largest taxpayer in the city of North Van. We pay them almost, I think it's $1.9 million a year just to the city. We pay a little bit to the district as well. And we try and inject lots of money into the local community, not just through community investment, but it's our preference if we can to do our procurement locally. So that was, you know, first option would be North Van, North Shore, Vancouver, you know, BC if we can. We've got a huge piece of equipment on our coal system, and we're about to buy another one. And we were able to get those built in Sydney, BC. So those are real success stories when you can spend the money here instead of somewhere overseas. We're on federal land. We lease our land from the port. They're our landlord. I think that's a little bit of a complex thing for people to understand is the port. It's all the port. But there's these individual operators, those of us who lease land from the port, that are the independent businesses working there. We operate 24/7, 362 days a year. It would be 365 if we could get the union to give us those 3 more days in their collective agreement. So, I mean, you know, that's a big reason why I have a job, because there's a lot of people that live pretty close to us. I don't think you would get a facility like the port or a terminal like Neptune built today in an environment where we are, and we don't take that for granted. Burrard Inlet is a pretty special place. It's the gateway to Asia, and it's a deep water protected port. Those companies that own us really count on being able to get their goods to market through us. So we have to do a very good job and be very good neighbors. That's everything from our environmental systems to our relationships. We don't take it for granted. We work on it continuously. Trains are sort of our lifeblood because those products are all coming to us by rail, and then we're loading them, we're taking them off the trains, loading them onto the ships. The rail bridge to North Van, which is the one that runs parallel to the Second Narrows, that's the bottleneck right now. All the terminals in North Van have grown, have invested money, but we all need the same rail service. So I think there's around 18 to 20 crossings over the bridge right now. And that means a train can come one way and then go back. That's 2 crossings. And we use about half of them just at our terminal. So you've seen what's going on at Vancouver Wharfs, which is Kinder Morgan, where the sulfur is by the bridge. There's a little terminal near them called Fiberco. There's 2 grain terminals already. There's a new grain terminal being built. We all share the same rail service. So the federal government has announced, they've announced it about 3 times actually so far, about how it goes. We haven't seen any of the money yet, but they're supposed to be investing in removing some of the bottlenecks from that rail corridor. Things like venting the tunnel under Burnaby Mountain better so that trains can go through there closer to one another. Right now a train goes through and they have to vent it first because there's people on the cruise and the carbon monoxide buildup wouldn't be safe. And then they're building new rail sidings so trains can sit there and wait, get through more quickly. We handle about 330 ships a year at our terminal. I think I'll get to it in a little while, but we have 3 separate deep sea berths. And it's pretty common to have a couple ships in at a time at the terminal. So yeah, that's a better look at where we are. You can see Low Level Road here. And this is Neptune. So we have these 2 green roof buildings are potash storage. Potash needs to always be kept dry. Gets wet, it's basically like a salt, so it just turn into a congealed lump. And the coal is best kept wet, so it's in open storage. And then this little shed here was the phosphate rock storage shed. It remains to be seen what we do with that. Our berths are here, here, and here. The first one being used exclusively for the steel making coal, and these 2 for potash. this one also to offload the phosphate rock when we're doing that. Does anybody know about the materials I keep talking about? Do you know what potash is for? No. Some?
Is it coking coal or is it?
It is, yeah. Tech kind of coined the term steel making, but metallurgical or coking, yes, 100%. I'll get to that. I know I've got a slide on that. So the potash is almost all for fertilizer. It can either be used as it is or it can be blended with phosphate and nitrogen. So the biggest countries that purchase that are Brazil, China, Indonesia, places in South America, places where there's large crop production. The customers are usually either fertilizer companies or sometimes farmers, agricultural companies. There's a bunch of different grades of potash, and some of them are used for industrial purposes too. I think glass, water purification, maybe some pharmaceuticals, things like that. It's fascinating to go into a potash mine. They're a kilometer below ground, or a mile below ground, very dry. And it looks like that for miles and miles and miles. It all looks exactly the same. We move the potash trains around the site with our own locomotives, these blue locomotives, which if you're a train spotter, apparently people are really into them. They come and they stand and they watch them on our site. They're kind of like a hybrid as far as a locomotive goes because they have electrical generators as well as diesel engines, which help us only use the amount of diesel power that we need to and cut down on our fuel use, things like that. I showed you the storage sheds already and the berths. We can load about 4,000 to 5,000 tons of potash an hour onto a ship if we're at the berth that has 2 ship loaders. The coal, yes, all coking, metallurgical, steel making, whatever your preferred word is, not thermal coal, not from the US. Those are the key things that people want to know these days. I think 5 years ago there wasn't even that level of awareness that there was a difference. But of course there's still a carbon footprint when you make steel, but you do need coal to make steel. It's the only way to do it. And steel is a highly recycled material, and it's used for, you all know, everything from like the cutlery on the table to, big infrastructure projects and some of the things that people consider to be the future solutions. You need you need steel to make solar, you need steel to make wind turbines and rapid transit systems. So there's no getting away from it.
So where does the coal come from?
The coal comes mostly from the Elk Valley area of BC. I think Teck has about 6 mines in BC and 1 in Alberta, but it's all Western Canada.
Is that up Tumbler Ridges?
No, it's like Creston, Elkford,
Creston,
Fernie, that
area.
kind of area. Yeah.
Tucked up against the Alberta border.
And it's going to places where they make steel. So people think of the Asian steel mills, but I think they think less so of the European ones. I've seen ships going to Germany and Poland and the Czech Republic from Neptune, places like that. But it's all overseas trade. Nothing's going to the US, nothing domestic, all overseas. Again, we move the coal trains around our site with an electrical indexer, so the diesel engines are not pulling them once they get to our site. And these are they look like specs here, but these are the big machines that either take the coal off the conveyors when we're unloading the trains or scoop it up, reclaim it, put it on the conveyor belts when it's going out to the ships. I guess the other interesting thing to note is both the potash and the coal come to us on what's called unit trains. So the whole train is that material. So there isn't the shunting, they don't have to take the cars apart and put them back together. It's an entire train of coal cars or an entire train of potash cars. And we're so close to the bridge that we don't have a lot of train traffic impact on the North Shore because the trains are coming straight off the bridge onto our site. In fact, generally they're so long that there's still a piece of them on the bridge when they reach our site. Yeah. I talked a little bit about environmental systems. I mean, it goes without saying for a business like ours these days, but we do try and continuously advance our environmental systems. The pieces of that are air quality, water quality, mostly, noise and light pollution as well. So the coal is treated with water, as I mentioned. We have a series of spray holes around the perimeter of the coal pile, and then we also add water every time the coal transfers on a belt or anything like that. And they add about 9% volume of water to the coal between when it arrives and when it's shipped out. And we're spending, just as an example of how we are always trying to do better, we're spending about $6 million to replace those poles with something that's a better spraying system, so it will have more complete coverage of the coal. They're attached to weather stations, so they'll come on when it's particularly hot or windy, but they can also be turned on manually. We collect and treat all the water from both those product systems completely separately. Water quality and water discharge is managed by the Provincial Ministry of Environment. Air quality is managed by the regional district, so Metro Vancouver, and we have permits from all these different levels of government.
Is the water recyclable for use a
Some
second
of it.
time around, or?
Some of it is. We can't put it through that spray system, but we can use it on the conveyors when it's recycled. So I think it's around 10% of our water gets recycled. So there's lots of room for improvement still. Well, and then I guess these two organizations, which most people haven't heard of, they're just in the general public, but they are environmental certification agencies. They come in and they audit us, so it's not just us drinking our own Kool-Aid, but they actually tell us things we need to do to get better, and they monitor the degree to which we are doing those things. So they're good certifications to have. This is probably the part that you're the most interested in. I've been at Neptune for about 3 years, and I have to say I'm really lucky I arrived to a really good foundation. Our past president, Jim Belsham, and my predecessor, Tony Nardi, they had about 12 years ago realized that good companies needed to be doing this stuff, and that we needed those relationships with the local community, even though we weren't marketing anything. So we do a lot of community investment, which, as I mentioned and Karen knows, is for the most part pretty philanthropic. We just do it because people ask us. They say they've identified a need in the community, as opposed to it being something that's really strategic, that it's going to be a great marketing platform. So that's mostly in the areas of children and youth, which is, I think, great alignment with what you do, seniors, and environmental things, because with the business that we're in, people expect us to be doing things to better the local environment. So the environmental stuff, I'll deal with that first because it's sort of the most separate. That's things like salmon enhancement, like it could be a really little stream keepers project, or it could be the Seymour Salmonid Society's education program for kids. We support those. We recently sponsored something called Pollution Tracker, which is an initiative of the Oceanwise brand at the aquarium. They do sampling up and down the coast at various stations, so they're measuring pollutants in the water, like all kinds of pollutants, things that wash off our clothes and get into the ocean, things from pharmaceuticals that get into the ocean, industrial pollutants. They take soil samples, sediment samples, and mussel samples to determine what's in the water. So there happens to be a monitoring station pretty close to our terminal in Burrard Inlet, so we've sponsored that. In the areas of children and youth, it could be programs through an agency like North Shore Neighborhood House that has, young parents programs, youth outreach programs, daycares, the full range. Or it could be, in the case of these cute little guys, youth sports. We sponsor most of the youth sport leagues, but is at the very littlest, most grassroots level, like U5 and 6 soccer and T-ball, the age where they're like super excited to get their first uniforms, and it's really about participation, and a little bit of corporate sponsorship just helps keep the fees more affordable so more families can put their kids in sports. That's kind of our goal. They get too old or too good, we exit, leave that for someone else. I try and get out to a couple of community events a year. I think that's at Lynn Valley Days, just to interact with people if they have questions. People are usually kind of surprised to see us there. What are you doing here? And we just want to talk and see if people have any questions. And then we give tours, which is what this is. Last year we did it over the course of 4 days in the summer. I'm not sure what we're doing this year. We're kind of waiting to see because the site is so busy with construction right now. We might wait till fall. But we try and get community members in for a tour because I think it just removes the mystery, you know. It's one thing to come and talk to you here, but if you can get right down there beside the trains and the ships and the coal, like you have a good understanding of what's going on. This is a not up to date, so you probably won't see Rotary on there. And it's too small to read, but our old president used to like to talk about how everything, we try to integrate everything we do. So, you know, you see the focal areas of sport, environment, social impact, local purchasing, education, the population groups. But the point is, we try and kind of create connections with everything we do. And we were speaking earlier about partnership. Like, I really think of it more and prefer to approach these things more as partnerships, so that throughout the year we're thinking of each other. And I think it's great to have people who come to the ride, for example, see that Neptune sponsors it, but way more valuable to me is the relationship with all of you who are the Rotarians, who are the active volunteers in your community, and that you have a little bit of understanding about who we are as people and as a company and what we do. That's the kind of thing that I'm trying to promote through our community relationships for the most part.
We get to see you at your after your Christmas party too, right?
Yes,
Yes,
yeah,
so
we've used Operation Red Nose the last couple of years to drive us home from our Christmas party. Yeah. I made this slide last night very quickly just to encourage you to check out our newsletter. I started it about a year ago because most of this stuff wasn't getting talked about. So we publish it in the North Shore News, but it's preferable if we can email people. So if anybody has any interest, you want to follow what we're doing from a community perspective for the most part, sometimes a little bit of operating or construction news, you can sign up for it on our website, neptuneterminals.com. But these are just a sample of some of the articles that were in the last issue, mostly focused on our partnerships. And I think we did a story on the ride early on, didn't we? Yeah.
Yes.
We could do another one, maybe do another one this summer. That's it as far as formal stuff, but if anybody has questions, I'm happy to spend some time.
For those visit, sometimes the high school student come
Yep.
to,
Yeah.
because we have an Interact program, the high school Rotarian, we call them Interacts.
Okay.
And we have Rotary, and the Interact, and we have now the Kids Early Act. And the Rockridge School, we have an Interact program.
Okay.
And another one coming is the Mulgrave School, private school, and maybe we can make a the tour. And because the environmental is all our concern, and we are educating the kids, and they should be understand how the industry can be manageable close to the residential areas. That's really important. And also we have a plan to start the Ocean Watch program to protect our water.
I heard about that this morning,
yeah, keep the species alive in the future. Stop the illegal fishing and control the water, those kind of stuff. And then maybe we ask your support in those projects.
Sure.
To be not just for financial, to be part of it, to take the authorities more seriously, the big names behind it, because the protection is your priority as well. And also we prepare Karen and Chris, our membership committee, we prepare a partnership package for you, just not for once a year or twice a year, just not for the operational road nose and not for just for the bike ride.
Rotary generally,
yes,
yeah.
because we need you, and also you need us, because we are the bridge between the community.
Yeah, exactly.
And to reaching the 30 Rotarians, it means reaching the thousands of people. And in North Shore, we have 5 clubs. In North Vancouver, we have 2 clubs, North Vancouver and the Lions Gate. And in West Vancouver, we have 2, Sunrise and the Evening Club. And in the Bowen Island, we have another one, total 5. We are all together. And if we partner with you, and those clubs is automatically be part of the our partnership program. And normally you can only allow to be member just in one club.
Oh, okay.
But you know, we operate with the all others, because we prepare something with the membership committee. We're gonna talk about the details. Thank you very much, again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. That was really great.
Did you, I know we're supposed to finish, but did you have another question?
I just had a real quick question
Sure.
about where's the liability in for environmental purposes? You load the ship
Yeah,
and then the ship pulls out. Is that the?
that's the ship's captain, the shipping line, yeah, and the
So,
port
if there was a-
manages, you know, like the port has a lot of regulations about what ships can and can't do in the harbor.
So you're done once you load the ship.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyone else have any questions?
I just have one comment, and that is in keeping with our ongoing partnership, Lisa. One of the things that we've talked about doing is holding an occasional meeting somewhere else. And it would, just from what you've described, it would be great if we could have a meeting at Neptune and
Sure.
maybe combine it with a tour or
Yeah, of
something like
course,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll look to do that in the future.
We could meet in the boardroom and then get on a
Yeah.
little bus.
That'd be
over
great.
the- Sure.
That'd be great.
Yes.
Lisa, you mentioned the bottlenecks of the bridge. The tanker traffic would be a big issue then, for the
Yeah.
ports on the North
I
Shore.
mean, anytime that bridge has to go up is a time we can't go under.
Yep.
Right?
So it could start,
Or sorry, over it. Yeah.
could start,
Yes. Yeah. And most of our ships transit the other, well, they all transit the other way under the first narrows.
Okay, Lisa, well, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
in. We, our club would like to, on your behalf, donate, I think it's, how much are we donating? $25
Excellent.
to help
Kids.
eradicate
Polio.
and polio.
Yeah. Nice.
So,
Thank
so it's
you.
been a while since I've been.
Thank you.
Vaccinates 100